What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Davidson Boswell Show. Doing another interview today. Maybe a lot of you don't know this, but I kind of started making content in the way I do, content oriented towards like ranting, essentially, when I was out in Thailand. And I was performing comedy over there for 2 months. This was right after October 7th happened. I went to Thailand in late October and stayed there through the new year. And the guy who owns the comedy club out there, it's called the Comedy Joint out in Bangkok, Thailand. I had him on and I interviewed him. He's a really interesting guy. He's incredibly knowledgeable. He made a lot of money in the tech space, and he's now selling marijuana. Legally, by the way. But let me pull that up. What the name of his company is, really quick. But yeah, I interviewed him. The topics ranged from Brexit to why tech people are so fucking weird and kind of how those are connected. And I have a limited amount of money and capability. So unfortunately, our recording timed out. So I cut off about the last third of the interview because it was just cut off midstream. But there's still a good chunk, like, a 30-minute interview in here that I think you guys will find really interesting. I really come down on the side that this is an intentional thing that's happening by the billionaire class, sowing dissension in countries, like Elon Musk, like stoking racial hatred in places like Britain. And he kind of says, no, this is like just ineptitude. But you'll hear his takes on these things, and I think you'll really like it. And it's called Puffin Farms. If you go to puffin-farms.com, check it out. And then Bangkok-comedy.com if you want to check out his comedy club. He's not paying me to do this. I just thought he lived a really interesting life and has a lot of great takes on things. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview with Chris Cooke. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Davidson Boswell Show. We're joined today by Chris Cooke, a comedian and tech entrepreneur. Thanks so much for coming on the pod, Chris. Appreciate
Yeah,
you.
thanks for having me. I'm a big fan. Actually, I've heard a few
Yeah,
episodes. Really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Same here. So I'm very curious. Like, we are, in a very big period of flux in society, and seemingly tech billionaires are buying up all the means of media control. Right? Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Elon Musk owns Twitter. And I guess my first question to you would be: have you met these kind of tech, CEOs, these tech guys, and what are they like in private? And are they as kind of like pompous as they seem?
So the first rule of Epstein's Island is we're not allowed to talk about Epstein's Island. No, I'm not quite swimming in those pools yet. I'm not super
Yeah,
yacht
one
rich.
day. Yeah.
I hope not. No, it takes
Right.
a special kind of mental illness to make a few million and be like, it's not enough. I demand more. Like, it's enough. Trust me. I'm very happy. I'm relaxed. I've made two terrible investments, a comedy club and a weed farm in Thailand.
Oh, no.
Looks fun on Instagram, but trust me, that will stop me from getting rich for the rest of my life. Don't you worry.
Right. You're artificially limiting your success.
Yep. Yeah, you've got to put a ceiling on that just to calm yourself down. So,
right.
In answer to your actual question, I mean, look, we live in a gilded age, right? Like, they're absolutely awful people. I'm a champagne socialist, so if I could, I would invest in guillotine production.
The last capitalist hung will be the one who sells us the rope. That's good.
Yeah, well, so I've literally signed up for the Socialist Party here in the UK, and I thought that would put me on the good list. Just like I always say, like, please and thank you to ChatGPT, just in case they remember. But someone pointed out to me, Chris, have you not studied history? The first that were killed in the French Revolution.
Got a big target on your forehead?
Yeah. Were the socialists. And the first that were killed in Nazi Germany as well. Famously, the Socialist Party there were warned about data security and integrity. A very boring and German topic. However, one of the first things the Germans did was just found all of the books of all of the socialists, all of their addresses, and just went door to door. But in actual answer to your question, I do think these techs are idiots. They're suffering from survivorship bias. I know that's incredibly unpopular to say, but
So they're not as smart as it seems intentional that they're artificially inflating their own self-importance through buying media companies. They're
well,
basically
it's worse than that. But what I'll say is interesting is no one respected my opinion when I was a poor socialist.
right.
Now they listen to me.
Interesting. Funny how that works.
But yeah, no, I've met a bunch of people who, as I say, are chronically rich, like as a disease. So I've been on a couple of these like entrepreneur holidays. I would say I was very middle of the pack. So I sort of met 28-year-olds who just sold their businesses for like hundreds of millions.
Right.
If I had to characterize most of them, it was almost all inherited wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Like the few working class boys done good were the exceptions and were kind of the legends at the party. But all of them had, it's very hard not to make $1 million when you inherit 10. Like you'd have to be phenomenally dumb. Really?
You're just patting yourself on the back until you leave a bruise, Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I say, like lovely people, but of course they've grown up going to the finest dinner parties and the best finishing schools. All they have is dinner party etiquette. They're very good at shallow conversation and being lovely. That's their lives have pampered them for that. But yeah, no, as I say, the Musks and the Jeff
That's a different
Bezos,
strata, right? You're not.
Yeah, but as I say, it's special kind of insane. Something wrong with
and
them.
I would just say that I think it's interesting that they seemingly want us to live like with their ideology, and I would say that it's interesting because they are so removed from humanity. So they are attempting to make the world in their image, and their image is insane, So
you talk about them like they have some plan. Honestly, I think they're just feigned fools. They're libertarian when it's convenient for them. They'll ask for a government handout when it's available. Right? Like I'm preaching to the choir, but yeah, like Elon Musk is on every government's teat possible, and is now like bidding through PR. To be the head of NASA. So Elon Musk is the ultimate government welfare queen.
Hey, come on. Are you sure you're okay? Blink twice if they don't have a Mossad agent after you right now. You can't talk about these things if you're in your inner sanctum,
As long as we don't insult Boeing, we're good.
Yeah. Well, so that leads me to my kind of next question. You live in the UK, and there were I view these movements like Brexit and even US elections as these titanic struggles between the billionaire class or the millionaire class in a lot of ways. So, people like Nigel Farage representing certain moneyed interests versus, I don't know, someone like David Cameron, who's more institutionalist, you know what I mean? And kind of see the trees through the forest. So do you think that Brexit was these people kind of imposing their will, or was this like an actual populist movement, or was it manipulated by I don't know, like the billionaire class or the millionaire class?
None of the above. So I see what you're getting at. It's a common thing I've heard, the idea that Trump, like Boris Johnson, like Brexit, are these populist movements which respond because of the inevitable failure of neoliberal capitalism to do any tangible benefits to people. I mean, we talk about the working class, but to just anyone, right? Like any tangible benefits to anyone who isn't the landed gentry landlords holding it over us all. I think where it goes wrong, and maybe this is a bit of a conspiracy theory, and this isn't popular.
I'm all for it.
Well, yeah, don't worry. I'm not going to start talking about lizard people and aliens and gay frogs. But I think the populist that really rocked the boat in the UK was Jeremy Corbyn. And the comparison with Bernie Sanders is one thing, but from a European perspective, Bernie Sanders wasn't that left, wasn't that radical. Jeremy Corbyn was. Jeremy Corbyn actually stood on a platform of radical change. Like he was one of the first pushers for peace in Ireland before it was popular. Yeah,
First pushes for what?
Peace in Northern Ireland before it was popular.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right, and they they weaponized this against him like it was a bad thing. Like he was talking to Sinn Féin. You're like, you mean the government in power in Northern Ireland now, who we made a peace treaty with?
Right.
Like, here's a picture of Margaret Thatcher talking to Sinn Féin the 6 months later. Like,
people have no recollection,
Well, it's very convenient, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
And likewise, he was ahead of the curve on Israel. Now, tactically, strategically, commonsensically, I don't know if that's the word, but I'm talking to American. I can just make up words whenever I want.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Fine.
Let it
Freedom.
Yeah. Big gulp.
He he platformed a lot of militant Muslim people or people that had also been on stage with. It became the like 3 degrees of separation. The right claims to hate cancel culture.
Okay, so
until it's convenient for them. So Jeremy Corbyn had been at an event where he'd spoken before someone who'd spoken at another event along the stage with someone. So in the height of Twitter, the conspiracy theory.
So this is 2014, 2013 era, like before Brexit.
None of this mattered, right? Like, and until he got elected. And the reason Labour was trying to break the stranglehold of the unions, because Labour used to be about unions, and then the whole Tony Blair movement was to push that out of the party. Although Labour had voted to stop union power, Labour still ran, like all parties do, on a system of super PACs and a bunch of people voting for who gets to be the next leader. In order to fuck over the unions, Labour did a democracy. And this always happens in neoliberal politics, right? They're like, we like this system. We've set the rules up. We've rigged the game, right? It's in our favor. Oh shit, we don't like what's happening. Let's bring in this extra rule in the third quarter.
Yeah.
And call it democracy.
You'd rather ally with the right than the left if it means that the status quo is going to be threatened. At least that's liberalism.
I know what you're talking about, but what happened here precisely was they actually went democratic because they knew the way the vote would go, so that they moved the goalpost. And then so they said, let's open up to more democracy, so we don't have a bunch of union leaders voting on who our next leader is. Cool.
I see.
Democratic in it. Yeah. And everyone went, Jeremy Corbyn. And everyone, oh, fuck. He voted wrong.
Yeah.
No. And so you suddenly have this guy who's just, the heart of the Labour Party, probably not meant to be its mind, probably, not a Machiavellian politician.
Right.
But he's been right on most things for a very, very long time, and loved by his constituents. He just, despite him doing not much wrong, they kicked him out of the party. Even though he was still following their rules and still loyal to the Labour, even though after they semi-kicked him out of the party, he was still campaigning for the party that had just kicked him out. Like Bernie after
Bernie.
Hillary did him wrong.
Exactly like Bernie, yeah.
Loyal to a fault, right? Heart in the right place. A sucker, shall we say.
Yeah.
That's why the good losing game theory. So Jeremy Corbyn comes in. Let me finish this. Jeremy Corbyn comes in, massively popular. The whole Labour Party splits and the whole establishment moves against him. He's the populist we should be scared of. And I would argue that Brexit happened because the whole establishment was so terrified of Jeremy Corbyn, who was willing to enact actual socialist change into the UK, a country which has barely had any socialist policies for 100 years, that Brexit was the meat that they gave to the public to distract them and stop Jeremy Corbyn. And the weirdest thing is Jeremy Corbyn was actually pro-Brexit. As a proper lefty left, he did not like Europe. I don't like how this, binary thinking, this thing gets divided between left and right, and people on the right don't like immigration, so they voted for Brexit. But it's not like the EU is some like goody. You see what France is doing right now, trying to stop a left-wing party get to power.
Yeah.
Like Germany will talk a good game on Russia, right? Like stopping the import of Russia, boycotting Russia, right? Embargoes on Russia. But America literally has to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline to stop Germany from using Russian oil.
Right.
And so Corbyn was a genuine lefty who was actually one of the most pro-Brexit people before Brexit was even coined as a term. But then
Yeah.
because the party was furious and split, and so they forced him to run on we'll have another referendum platform, even though he was the only genuinely pro-Brexit person. What we could have had was an election where one party was saying Brexit and socialism, and one party was saying Brexit and more austerity, right? More poverty, more taxes for the poor, more tax breaks for the rich. And that's not what we got. And so here's my conspiracy theory. I don't have much evidence for it, but I've yet to hear many people refute it. And in fact, the best I heard was it was a conservative think tank advisor said the same thing on a podcast. And I was like, yeah. The whole institution mobilized against this populist socialist person who was about to do changes in the British system. And Brexit was a really good distraction for the working classes.
Well, and it's an ongoing distraction because it continues to happen, right? Like people are continuing to suffer from the effects of it, and it's completely shifted the debate in the country, right? There's no longer, and then Keir Starmer, I would say if he's Bernie Sanders, Keir Starmer is Hillary Clinton, right? Moderate, institutionalist, war hawk, you know?
Well, he ran on a campaign of I will be Jeremy Corbyn, but I'll win. So it was very. I don't know is AOC a fair comparison?
Well, AOC is moderating as fast as possible so that she can have political power, you know?
Right. So it's this like wolf in sheep's clothing. And Keir ran during the election campaign that, look, Corbyn, I liked all his policies, but he didn't win us an election. I'll win us an election. Embarrassing enough, that is when I joined the Labour Party. I didn't really know who Keir Starmer was. I didn't know that he'd worked as a lawyer protecting war criminals. Although allegedly he's also ran he also ran as a lawyer suing McDonald's. So yeah, pros and cons. Fine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like that's the thing, and that is my big problem with the left in America is their puritanical nature. You know what I mean? Like not accept that if someone does one thing wrong, it's like Chris Hedges talks about this all the time. It's like you have no permanent allies; you're only allied against permanent power, right? So just because someone has done something once that's bad, if they're fighting the same cause as you, you should join up with them.
And there's a superb Irish political commentator. I think it was for Novara Media or Double Down News, talking about how if we police our politicians too much, if they can never make a mistake or never have said the wrong thing, never have written the wrong thing, what you end up with is only people who've been to finishing school and media training. Exactly. And that is an elite which excludes the working class because, mate, if you've ever been in a working class pub, they're not politically correct.
No. And that's the thing. I was talking about this with a lot of my friends, and the only way to affect real change is to have artists and intellectuals join up with unions, right? There needs to be muscle behind the ideology. And if there isn't, then you're just a bunch of blowhards jacking each other off. You know what I mean? Like nothing's happening. You know, it's a circle jerk, essentially.
Sure. And they love the divide and conquer politics, which,
right.
I mean, it's why it's so sad that, like, again, this triangle of the liberals versus the actual left. Yeah, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is all this thought policing and talk about punching down and, like, obviously, I'm not anti-woke, not against it, but it has been weaponized. And I think what worked, there is a transatlantic pipeline between these two things. What works for the Conservatives in one country is used in the other. And where they really jumped the shark, because they really did kill Jeremy Corbyn ultimately with anti-Semitism. And that was the stick they beat him with. Now, look, if anyone thinks that Labour is more racist than the Conservative Party...
yeah, there's nothing to be said about that.
But when they really jumped the shark on this is when they accused Bernie Sanders of being anti-Semitic, and everyone went, what? One of the few Jewish guys, shut the fuck up.
I know. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, like politics is radicalizing all over Europe because of immigration, and
So they
declining
say.
living
So they say.
standards. No, I
So
know that's what they say, but let me finish my thought. But
sure.
I was just going to say, like, declining living standards are happening, and immigration is the, scapegoat, essentially. So I'm curious about, I guess, where you stand on freedom of speech as it relates to people like Elon Musk intentionally stoking racial tension in places like England, right? Where you have someone with 193 million Instagram followers who is intentionally kind of retweeting misinformation about a Muslim invasion, things like that, and just kind of what you think about what that portends for the futures of democracy, and also if government is going to be able to, because Britain is different than the United States in the sense that policemen will show up to your doorstep if you say something too egregious on the internet. And so where do you stand on that? Like, public safety versus freedom of speech.
There's four things I hope I remember to unpack from what you just said. So number
Right.
one, like Elon Musk joking about having his freedom of speech impinged, jokes. I have more of an issue that he owns a media platform in this gilded
Right.
age, right? That Jeff Bezos owns a newspaper. And these are the people that cry, oh, you can't say anything these days. Speaking as a rich white billionaire,
The
like we've
irony.
never had it so tough, right? Like, shut the fuck up. I am all for freedom of speech. But what I know from tech is that, it's absolutely run rampant. I think we're living in an age where, like, remember in the 70s where people were drink driving without seatbelts in cars that were guaranteed to kill you if you crashed, right?
Yeah.
Made of lead.
The Ford Pinto. Yeah.
And, like, we're living in that age for the internet. We're living in an age where we'll look back at it in 30 years and be like, fucking hell, how
Yeah.
did we let that shit fly? So,
Mhm.
so that's where we are. In terms of, like, oh God, that was a lot to unpack.
Yeah, sorry. That was a bit of a rambling question. But I guess, like, you see kind of the internet come to life sometimes, and then it reinforces itself, right? So there's these feedback loops. So if you say this group is violent, and then you keep showing images of it, intentionally, and not providing greater context, you get to essentially create reality, which is a dangerous thing, I would say, and
So,
one that,
so with
yeah.
that, I would say that Elon Musk is a dangerous scapegoat, and
Mm,
an easy target. I think there's a
mm,
worse thing going on. So, it's been fascinating to me watching the debate on immigration. I can't speak to Europe, but in England at least, where as the Conservatives were increasingly sure they were going to lose the election, they started ramping up the anti-immigration rhetoric. Now, the problem is the Conservatives have been in power for 14 years. It was starting to feel like I came from Thailand and I was like, I
uh-huh.
thought that was a one-party state. This is worse. Like, what?
Wow, that's hilarious.
Thailand had democracy before, more
Yeah,
recently
yeah.
than England.
Right.
So when every time they were complaining about something, we'd be like, who do you think's to blame? Like, you guys have been in charge for however long. And the nuts thing was, like, they just fudged the numbers. So firstly, they said, oh, we'll get Brexit to stop immigration, which, I mean, it stopped European immigration. Like, I know a bunch of Europeans that went, okay, if we're not welcome here, we'll leave. The
Mm,
tech sector lost a lot of good workers, right? Um, but truth be told, like, the numbers were just fudged because we used to count immigrants as, and they show I'm sure you have the caravans in Mexico. They show the small boats in the Channel and the Mediterranean, right? This is a tiny percentage. Most immigrants show up by plane, um, uh, and they overstay their visa or whatever. But the truth is, like, I was looking at the numbers on the graph, and I was like, hang on, hold on, there, zoom in on that. People invited here on work visas, and people
wow.
here as students, and I was like,
Hmm.
sorry, education, right, is like a fifth of the British economy. BAE Systems is, 25%.
Yeah, you guys have the
Just
most
one
prestigious
weapon.
universities in the world. Yeah.
Sure,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
And we suddenly started counting the people coming here to study as immigrants. And you're like, what? Why?
Yeah. It's like
When?
this fucking biological chemist is ruining my life.
This guy's been here 7 years. What's he doing? A PhD.
Performing surgery.
Shut the fuck up. It's like, really? And so they just fudged the numbers, gamed the stats, and then suddenly pretended to be outraged at the crisis they'd created.
Right.
It was just, and we agreed, but the way you framed the question, I had to retort. People aren't angry with immigrants. With a rising tide raises all ships. If everyone's getting richer, no one cares the color of their doctor. But when everyone's getting poorer, when literally, I don't know if this news has traveled across the pond, but they voted last year to reduce the fines when water companies pump raw sewage into the rivers and the seas. Is this not known as international news?
I mean, not that I saw, but that is like what should be on the front page of the New York Times, but instead it's about Kamala Harris's pole bump, So
fair enough. I mean, you have very long presidential election cycles, so no. But this was an amazing thing where we have a great water system, used to be public, built in the Victorian era, like all of our good shit is.
Right.
Thanks, India.
Right.
And then, we privatized the water systems, and they voted to they lobbied to vote to lower the fines for dumping shit in the rivers, and then immediately worked out, as if it was, they acted like, oh, this is news, not like we'd planned this the whole time, that the fines were cheaper than doing their job of treating the sewage.
Financialization of the economy. Yeah.
So the floodgates just opened, and literally you see our rivers are brown, our seas are brown. Like, we now have not a single river that the EU would consider drinkable water. They're like, nope, don't fucking.
And it all happened under Tory leadership, right? This is all been, Yeah. So I saw the famous John Oliver. John Oliver's kind of my conduit into British politics, and you'll be.
That's worse. Yeah. But John Stewart's Mind for American. That's fine.
Right. And so he talked about, I think the most stark thing was that the average height went down during Tory leadership by 1 centimeter. And if that is not an indication that something's wrong, that is literally malnutrition.
I'm doing what I can, right? I'm 6'7", I'm fat. So
Right. You got to get out there and have
Britain.
sex, man.
You're welcome.
All right. We're far enough into the pod where I don't think your wife is going to watch this. So.
she's walking around listening. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, perfect. Okay. So yeah, that's just something that so I come at it from maybe a little bit more of a cynical perspective, because you view it as kind of a system-wide thing, and I think that there are more nefarious privatization kind of practices happening, but they are manifest in these 4 or 5 dudes that are just running rampant around the world, inflicting their mentality on unsuspecting working class people.
So I think the problem with blaming 4 or 5 dudes is that if you killed those 4 or 5 dudes tomorrow, I'm pretty sure there's 10 dudes, slightly less intelligent, willing to jockey for their position.
Right.
That's like that. The system.
Neoliberalism gave birth to them, and it will birth others too.
And this is my problem with conspiracy theories. Whether you think the people at the top are space lizards or Jews,
right?
I don't care. I think we can all agree that the world is run by too few people with too much money.
Yes.
Where I disagree with the conspiracy theorists is the idea that they have this big plan. Because the world very much looks to me like a fucked up chaos that is just going to continually get worse, but because of basic greed.
Well, I certainly, I guess if you've seen, I've certainly, my name is Davidson Boswell. I'm a white guy. So people have let me, not into the inner sanctum, but I have talked to people very unguardedly about what they actually think about people who live in project buildings. And these are people that claim to be liberal, which is what my biggest bone to pick with liberals is that conservatives don't pretend, you know what I mean? They're like, I'm racist, you know what I mean? But liberals are I'm racist. Like they do
No,
it in
but
this.
they have a black friend who went to Harvard.
Right,
And
right,
why
exactly.
can't, if only these guys pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and all went to Harvard, wouldn't the
Right.
world be a better place?
Yeah. No, and you run into those people, and what they want is their flowers. They want their cake and to eat it too. You know what I mean? And I
This
was
is a problem that goes back to ancient Greece.
yeah.
So literally, I think as Plato talks about this, that once you have a certain amount of money, once you're in the upper echelon of power, you trade that money for reputation,
Yes.
right? For esteem, for pride, for that's the currency that matters at the dinner table of the elite, right? So that's what all this virtue signaling comes from, and that's why these people hate Trump because he's nouveau riche. Right, the fact that we have a French term for that goes back to Norman.
He's gaudy. He's gaudy. Yeah.
No, but the fact that we have a French term for that just shows just how elitist this thing is. Like,
True.
I don't know if we have time to get into England as a peasant society, but just the idea that we have Anglo-Saxon words that the working class speak and Latin words that the upper class speak, because we were invaded in 1066 by a bunch of Vikings who lived in castles and they spoke French. So the word for, the animal is Anglo-Saxon, and the word for the meat is French or Latin, right? And that's just how hierarchical our whole waspy system is built to be.
Well, people call things continental, right? You know what I mean? That's like, that's not a coincidence, I don't